The doorbell rang just past midnight, one sharp chime that sliced through the silence of her tiny apartment like a warning. Nari froze in the middle of her living room, clutching her mug of barley tea. She wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody visited her at this hour. Nobody visited her at all, really. The bell rang again. Her breath curled tight in her chest. The alley outside her apartment was quiet, narrow, barely wide enough for one person to pass. Her neighbors were all the type to ignore trouble, not knock on her door seeking help. She set down her cup, padded to the door, and looked through the peephole. She blinked. A man stood there, broad-shouldered, wearing a long black coat, the collar turned up. His hair was wet from the drizzle, falling into sharp, dark eyes that kept flicking down the hallway like he expected someone to burst out with guns blazing. His jaw was bruised. His cheek had a cut. And even through the fisheye lens, she recognized him. The Mafia Boss. People whispered about him around street stalls and in taxi lines. The man who controlled half the city's underworld. The one whose name, Dae-hoon, no one ever spoke too loudly. She had seen him once at the cafe where she worked, sitting in a private booth with men who radiated danger. He had barely glanced at her then. And now he was on her doorstep. She almost stepped back from the door. Then he spoke, voice low but steady. "Nari," he said, like they were acquaintances. Like he knew her. "Open the door. Please." She blinked again. "Please." A mafia boss didn't say please. Her heart was hammering too loud for her to think clearly, but she slowly slid the latch open. The moment she cracked the door, he nudged it wider and stepped inside, not aggressively, but urgently, like something was pushing him from behind. He shut the door with his back and leaned against it, breathing heavily. "What?" Nari swallowed, trying to find her voice. "What are you doing here?" Dae-hoon lifted his eyes to her, and she felt a spark of something she couldn't describe. He looked exhausted, hurt, human. Nothing like the invincible legend she had heard about. "I need somewhere to stay," he said. "Just for tonight." His gaze traced the room, alert. "I'm being tailed." "Tailed by who?" "People who want me dead." Her stomach twisted. She took one step back. Then another. Dae-hoon noticed, his expression tightening with concern, not anger. "I won't hurt you," he said, raising his hands slightly. "If I intended to, I wouldn't have knocked." Hard to argue with that. Nari pressed a hand to her temple. "But why me? I'm nobody. You could hide anywhere." He shook his head. "I can't go to my own people. They would be tracked. And my safe houses are burned. I needed..." His jaw flexed. "I needed a place they wouldn't expect. Somewhere quiet. Someone who..." He hesitated. "Someone who's what?" she whispered. "Someone who once slipped me a napkin at the cafe saying the cops were asking about me. Someone who looked scared doing it, but did it anyway." Her face warmed. She hadn't thought he remembered that. He took a slow breath. "I owe you for that. But tonight, I just need a roof and a few hours of quiet." Nari stared at him, at the bruise darkening near his temple, at the damp coat that clung to his shoulders, at the weight he seemed to be carrying entirely alone. "Stay," she finally said. "But just for tonight." Relief flickered over his face, so quick she might have imagined it. He nodded once. "Thank you." She stepped aside, letting him move deeper into the small apartment. The place barely fit a kitchenette, a couch, and her bedroom behind a sliding door. There was nowhere for a man like him to disappear, nowhere that matched his reputation. Yet he walked in quietly, placing his drenched coat over the back of a dining chair like he didn't want to drip on her floor. "You're hurt," Nari murmured. "It's nothing. It doesn't look like nothing." He touched the cut on his cheek, winced almost imperceptibly. "It'll heal." She crossed her arms. "Sit." He blinked at her tone. But then he sat at the tiny kitchen table without arguing. She grabbed a first aid kit from her cabinet. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't sure if it was fear or adrenaline or the simple shock of having South Korea's most feared man sitting at her dinner table like a cold, injured stray cat. She stood in front of him, swiping alcohol on a cotton pad. "Hold still." Dae-hoon did. He didn't flinch, even as she dabbed at the cut, and he inhaled sharply through his nose. His gaze followed her every movement, not threatening, just watchful. Like he wasn't used to anyone touching him gently. "You're trembling," he murmured. "You rang my doorbell in the middle of the night," she replied, voice tight. "Excuse me for being nervous." A low breath escaped him. Maybe a laugh, maybe a sigh. "I understand." Her fingers brushed the edge of another bruise along his jaw. "Who did this to you?" "You don't want that answer." "Maybe not," she admitted. He held her wrist lightly, stopping her hand. His palm was warm despite the chill on his clothes. "Thank you," he said softly. Nari's heart thudded. She pulled back and set the supplies away. "You can take the couch." Dae-hoon looked at the small, lumpy gray thing like it was a royal bed. "That's more than enough." He stretched slightly, wincing when his shoulder cracked. She grabbed a spare blanket and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed. A spark. She snatched her hand back too quickly. He didn't miss it. "Nari," he said quietly, "I didn't mean to bring danger to your door." "Then why did you?" His answer was simple. Too simple. "Because I trust you." Her breath caught. They barely knew each other. She'd only ever served him coffee, exchanged a few glances, warned him once without expecting anything in return. Trust wasn't what she expected from a man like him. She turned away before he could see her confusion. "Get some sleep." She slid the bedroom door closed behind her and leaned against it, chest rising and falling too fast. Through the thin wood, she could hear him shift on the couch, hear his breath steady, hear the rain picking up outside. She barely slept. Every creak of the building made her tense. Every sound from the living room reminded her he was there, alive, dangerous, wounded, and somehow safe. At dawn, light filtered in pale through her window. She pushed open the door. Dae-hoon was sitting up, fully awake, coat already back on, as if he'd been guarding the room all night. His eyes softened when he saw her. "I should go," he said. Nari nodded, though something in her chest tightened unexpectedly. "Will you be safe?" "For a while." He walked toward her slowly. "But I may need somewhere to disappear again." She swallowed. "This isn't a safe place for you." "No." But it felt. His gaze wandered around her home, landing back on her. It felt peaceful. Her pulse skipped. Dae-hoon reached for the doorknob, then paused. "If I knock again, will you open the door?" She didn't answer immediately, but his eyes, dark, steady, held hers with an honesty she hadn't expected. "Yes," she whispered. He nodded, stepped out into the morning, and disappeared down the alleyway like a shadow dissolving into the city. Nari closed the door behind him and pressed her fingers to her lips, trying to understand why her heart suddenly felt too loud. She didn't know it yet, but that night was only the beginning. The next 2 days crawled by like they were carrying secrets of their own. Nari worked her shifts at the cafe, smiled at the regulars, cleaned tables, steamed milk, everything exactly the way she always did, but her body felt strangely alert, as if her senses were tuned to a frequency she'd never felt before. Every time the front door chimed, she looked up. Every tall figure in a dark coat made her heart jump. Every shadow near the window made her wonder if he was watching, making sure she was safe, or if he was bleeding somewhere again, alone. It was ridiculous. She barely knew him. Letting him hide in her home for one night didn't make them connected. It didn't make her responsible. Yet something had shifted inside her, something she couldn't name. On the third night, long after the cafe had closed and the neon sign outside flickered weakly in the cold, Nari stepped into her apartment and exhaled. She had expected, hoped, to see a silhouette waiting by her door again. But there was nothing. Only the stillness of the hallway. She went inside, dropped her bag, and warmed leftover kimchi stew on the stove. She'd barely taken a sip when... Knock. Knock. Soft, careful, but unmistakable. Her spoon clattered onto the counter. Her heart nearly burst out of her ribs. She didn't even check the peephole this time. She opened the door. Dae-hoon stood there, hood up, shadows clinging to him like a second skin. His eyes were cautious, scanning the hall before settling on her. They softened the moment they met hers. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. She stepped aside without a word. He slipped in and closed the door with the same silent urgency as last time. But this time, he wasn't soaked or bruised. He looked tired, yes, but not hunted. His eyes moved around her apartment slowly, like he was grounding himself in a place he hadn't been sure he'd see again. "You're safe?" she asked. "For now." "You didn't look safe last time." He huffed a breath. "Last time was complicated." She crossed her arms, trying to ignore the warmth blooming in her chest. "You're still wearing the same coat." "Didn't have time to be fashionable." Her lips twitched. "Hungry." He blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Have you eaten?" she clarified, already ladling another bowl of stew. He stared at her like she'd broken one of the unspoken rules of his world. "No," he admitted. "Sit." He sat. Something eased inside her, like an invisible knot loosening. She placed the steaming bowl in front of him, grabbed a spoon and metal chopsticks, and nudged them toward him. Dae-hoon looked at the food for a moment before picking up the spoon. The first bite made his shoulders sag just a little. "This is good," he said. "It's leftovers. It's still good." She sat across from him, watching him eat as if witnessing something rare. Not because he was famous in the criminal world, not because he was dangerous, but because he looked grateful, almost peaceful. He finished half the bowl before speaking again. "I didn't mean to come back," he said lowly. "I didn't want to drag you into anything. But you did come back." His eyes lifted, locking onto hers with an intensity that sent a strange warmth down her spine. "Yes," he said. "I did." Silence settled between them, thick with everything unsaid. The kettle on the stove clicked as it cooled. The rain outside pattered against the window. Dae-hoon set his spoon down. "I trust you," he repeated, same words as before, but heavier now, like they meant more than just hiding. She looked away, suddenly shy. "You keep saying that. Because it's true." "How?" "You don't even know me." "You warn people you don't owe anything to," he said. "You let a stranger covered in bruises sleep on your couch. You give away food without being asked. You think I don't notice these things?" Her throat tightened. She didn't know what to do with his words. They were too sincere, too direct. Like he had no idea how much they affected her. "Are they still after you?" she finally asked. He leaned back slightly, rubbing a thumb along the side of the bowl. "Yes. But tonight isn't about running." "What is it about?" His gaze softened. "Rest." She swallowed. "You can stay here again." Dae-hoon's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You're sure?" "You came here instead of going anywhere else," she said. "That must mean something." He held her eyes for a long moment. Something unspoken passed between them, warm and fragile. Eventually, he nodded. "Then, I'll take the couch again." "No," the word slipped out before she could stop it. Dae-hoon froze. "No. I mean," she flustered immediately. "I mean, you'll hurt your back again. You slept sitting up last time." He blinked. "You noticed." She bit her lip. "Hard not to." He exhaled, almost a laugh. "Then where should I sleep?" She pointed at her bedroom. "I have a floor mattress I never use. It's thicker than the couch. You can take that." Dae-hoon looked genuinely stunned. "You're offering your bedroom?" "It's not the bed. Just the floor mat. Don't get ideas." "I wouldn't dare." His voice held a faint warmth, maybe even a smile. She grabbed the mattress and unfolded it on the floor. He watched her, expression unreadable but gentle. When she finished arranging blankets and a pillow, she backed away nervously. There, she said. Comfortable. Yes, he answered quietly. More than you know. She left the room before her cheeks could betray her. But she didn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the soft sounds from the bedroom, a shift of blankets, a quiet sigh, the rhythm of someone else sharing her space. At some point, her eyes drifted shut. A loud thudding noise jolted her awake. Not from her apartment, from outside. She sat up, heart racing. Footsteps thundered down the exterior stairs. Shouts, too distant to make out, echoed through the alleyway. Her door slid open. Daehoon stood there, fully alert, eyes sharp as a blade. "Get away from the window," he said softly but firmly. Nari scrambled back. He stepped into the room, closing the distance between them as more footsteps echoed outside. "Is it them?" she whispered. "Not sure yet." Her breath trembled. He reached out and steadied her shoulder with a gentle touch. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said. More shouting. More footsteps. The alley lights flickered. Nari's pulse roared. But Daehoon stood in front of her like a shield, tall and calm, every line of his body poised to fight if he needed to. Something in her chest unfurled at that sight. Fear, yes, but something warmer too. Something she couldn't deny anymore. She felt safe with him. She trusted him too. When the noises finally faded, Daehoon slowly exhaled and let his shoulders drop a fraction. Still tense, but relieved. "They're not here for me," he said. "Just police chasing some drunk kids." Nari let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Daehoon looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. Softer. Closer. "Nari," he murmured. "Yes. You weren't afraid of me." His voice was low, thoughtful. "You were afraid for me." Her cheeks warmed. He stepped closer, just a little. "Why?" She didn't look away. "Because you came to me. Because you trusted me first. Because I—" her voice faltered, but she forced the words out. "Care." The air between them tightened. Daehoon's breath hitched almost imperceptibly, as if her admission cracked something inside him wide open. He didn't touch her. But his voice dropped to a whisper. "I care too." The apartment felt too small for the emotions swelling between them, too quiet for the sudden, fragile intensity pulsing in the room. Neither of them moved. Neither of them wanted to. This time, Nari knew it clearly. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of something they didn't quite know how to name yet. Neither of them slept after that moment. Not because of fear, though adrenaline still hummed faintly in the walls, but because something had shifted between them, something fragile and impossible to ignore. Nari sat at the edge of her bed, fingers twisting in the blanket. Daehoon stood near the doorway, watching her carefully, almost like he was afraid he'd break the air if he moved too fast. "Nari," he said softly, "I should keep distance. For your sake." "You're standing 3 steps away," she replied. "That's hardly distance." He breathed out, a small huff of amusement. But his eyes didn't lose that tense, conflicted warmth. "I don't want to put you in danger." "You already did," she answered gently. "And yet, I let you in again. That's what scares me." She blinked. "Scares you?" He nodded once, slow, as if admitting something he'd kept buried for years. "I'm not used to someone choosing me. Not without a reason." Her chest tightened. "Everyone chooses you out of fear?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to her small balcony window, where the rain was finally beginning to slow. "Fear," he murmured. "Or power. Or because they want something from me." "And what do you think I want?" Daehoon looked at her again, eyes steady. "Nothing." For a moment, it felt like the world stilled around them. Nari swallowed. "I don't want nothing," she whispered. "I want you safe." "That," he said quietly, "is something I don't know how to accept." He stepped forward, slowly, like approaching a scared animal, but it was Nari who closed the distance. Her hand reached up, barely touching his arm, just above the wrist. He froze, breath-catching. "I'm not scared of you," she said. "You should be. But I'm not." Something in him softened, melted, maybe even broke. He lowered his head slightly, his forehead not quite touching hers but close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath. "Nari," he murmured, voice barely audible, "I don't know why I came to your door that night. I just remembered your eyes in the cafe. I remembered trusting them." Her heart fluttered painfully. "I'm glad you came." He closed his eyes briefly, as if those words grounded him. "Nari," he whispered again, like saying her name was something he wasn't allowed but couldn't resist. Then 3 loud knocks rattled the door. They jumped apart. Daehoon instantly reached behind his coat. Instinct, protection, readiness for violence. His posture changed completely, like a shadow slipping over him. Nari grabbed his wrist before he could pull anything out. "Wait," she whispered. "Don't move." The knocks came again, this time louder. Nari tiptoed to the door, peeking through the peephole. Then she sagged in relief. "It's Mrs. Han from downstairs," she said. "She probably wants to complain about the late-night noise." Daehoon exhaled, tension sliding off him in layers. He stepped back into the bedroom, standing out of sight. Nari opened the door. Mrs. Han, tiny, elderly, and armed with a hair roller still stuck in the back of her head, glared. "You making a racket up here? Sounds like a tiger fighting an elephant in your walls." Nari bowed apologetically. "Sorry, Ajumma. I dropped something heavy." Mrs. Han squinted. "You alone here?" Nari forced a smile. "Yes, of course." Mrs. Han's eyes narrowed, suspicious. "Well, keep the noise down. These old bones can't sleep through World War III." Nari nodded repeatedly until the woman shuffled off. When she closed the door, she found Daehoon leaning against the wall, expression somewhere between amused and relieved. "You handled that well," he said. "She scares everyone in the building," Nari muttered. Daehoon gave the smallest, rarest smile. "Not you." She looked away, suddenly warm all over. "It's almost dawn. You should rest." He shook his head. "I can't stay long. The gang following me, they'll scatter for a bit, but when they reorganize, they'll start looking again. I can't let them trace me here." "How would they?" she protested. "You walk. You don't bring your car. You don't call anyone. You—" "Nari." His voice was gentle but firm. "My world finds things. Even things it shouldn't." She fell silent. Her throat tightened painfully. "So you're leaving?" He stepped closer. "Not because I want to." Her next breath shook. "What if you get hurt again?" she whispered. A pause. "Then I'll heal. And if you don't?" He didn't answer. That silence was louder than gunfire. Nari felt something inside her collapse and rebuild all at once. She reached out impulsively, gripping the sleeve of his coat. "Stay 1 more hour." Daehoon inhaled sharply, almost like her touch had startled him. 1 hour, he repeated softly. She nodded. "Just sit with me." So they sat. Not on the couch. Not across from each other. But side by side on the floor, backs against the wall, knees touching lightly like neither of them wanted to break the fragile line of warmth between them. He ran a hand through his hair, damp from the mist outside. "I don't do this," he murmured. "Do what?" "This," he said simply. "Quiet. Peace. Company." Nari folded her legs beneath her and smiled faintly. "It suits you." He let out a soft, disbelieving breath. "You think so?" "Yes," she said. "When you're not glaring at the world like it owes you money." He glanced at her sideways, eyes softening. "You're braver than you look." "I'm terrified," she confessed. "Just not of you." That made him look away quickly, jaw tightening, not from anger, but from emotion he didn't want her to see. "When this is over," Nari said slowly, "when you're safe, what then?" Daehoon pressed his hands together, thumb tapping the side of his index finger. A habit, a hesitation. I don't know what my life looks like after this. Does it include disappearing? Possibly. And would you disappear from me too? His breath caught. A long moment stretched, one that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff waiting to hear if the wind was friend or enemy. Finally, he answered. No, his voice was barely a whisper. Not from you. Something warm and bright unfurled inside her. She leaned her shoulder against his. Then I'll wait. He stared ahead, eyes dark and unreadable, but his hand slowly, hesitantly moved until his fingers brushed hers. Not holding. Just touching. Nari, he murmured. If I survive this, I'll come back. Not in the night. Not asking for shelter. His voice grew steadier. I'll come back because I want to. Because I choose to. Her throat tightened. I'll open the door. He exhaled shakily, like her answer was the first thing in years that gave him hope. As the sky outside shifted from black to soft gray, Daehoon finally stood. It's time, he said. Nari rose with him, heart heavy. Will you tell me when you're safe? Yes. His gaze held hers a long moment. You have my word. He reached for the door, but paused. Then he turned back to her with a look she had not seen before, something vulnerable, raw, and painfully honest. Nari, he said quietly, you're the only place I've felt peace in a long time. Her breath shuddered. And you're the only person, he added, I trust with my life. Before she could speak, he opened the door and stepped into the cold morning light. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He walked away with purpose, as if carrying something precious he wasn't willing to lose. And Nari watched him until he turned the corner and vanished into the waking city. She closed the door slowly, pressing her forehead against the wood, a soft smile pulling at her lips despite the ache in her chest. He would come back. And when he did, she would open the door. No hesitation, no fear. Because somewhere in the twisted, dangerous threads of his world, Daehoon had chosen her. And she had chosen him too.